I have significant concerns that there were a large number of people yesterday who were denied their democratic right and their fundamental right to protest, and that the policing of yesterday's events was disproportionate.
And so, from what you're saying, that there had been conversations that had taken place between Republic and the police about what the kind of protesting would look like. What's your understanding of what was agreed?
Um, my understanding of what was agreed is exactly what they had intended to do, which was to stand at the designated section of Trafalgar Square with banners and posters and placards.
And so that's all they were doing, because it's really important. I think this, as you say, there's a lot of different bits of information. So Republic were not planning to throw rape alarms into horses or anything like that. They were basically just standing there with T-shirts and placards. Is that right?
Yes, and as far as I'm aware, there have been reports of intelligence in relation to the throwing of rape alarms at horses. The basis for that evidence intelligence is really not clear. It is quite difficult at such an early stage to be clear of exactly what intelligence the police had and what the basis of that intelligence was. I will be very interested as the matter proceeds and as the investigations continue to see if there is any reliable intelligence which is disclosed.
I mean, for many of my listeners, there will be a view which is, absolutely don't like the idea of ferocious crackdown on people. We have a democratic right to protest in this country, even though the sort of, legislation has been toughened up on that. But I think people will also have a common sense approach, thinking this was a huge event. There was a massive kind of issue of public gathering, public safety. Also, the eyes of the world were on the United Kingdom and London and that particular part of town in that moment. The police do have to be hyper vigilant. They have to be really on guard. They have to sort of not take any risks. And do you have any sympathy with the pressure that the police would have been under? Because if something had happened and something really, really dangerous had happened, I mean, they would have been absolutely slated, and a large section of the whole day could have been ruined, and there could have been injury to people.
Yes, of course. The police are in a very difficult position in terms of the fact that they had such a huge scale event to police and to manage and to ensure that it was managed safely. My concern is that it appears that a stance was taken by the Metropolitan Police, and they tweeted as such, stating that they would have very low tolerance for protests. And that is simply unreasonable within the circumstances when we are talking about legitimate lawful protests, particularly in the case of Republic, one which had been communicated and agreed with the Metropolitan Police.
And so, Katie, what's your view of, let's say, some of these other groups? Obviously, you're dealing with Republic here, who, from what you're saying, had been in contact with the police. They had agreed something which, from what you've said, and I'm taking what you say at face value because we don't have all the information yet, sounds quite sort of peaceable. But if it comes to light that there were other groups who were not behaving proportionately and peacefully, as it seems, you're saying Republic were, do you think that is a justification for the police having to take action? If there were other groups that were planning to do things like throwing alarms at horses, which could have unleashed all kinds of, hell, do you think the police were right to sort of crack down on that behaviour?
I mean, each case has to be assessed on its merits, and the police have an obligation to consider carry out a balancing exercise when they are policing protests, because any restriction on someone's rights under Articles 10 and 11 of the European Convention of Freedom of Assembly and Freedom of Expression, it must be balanced with the rights of other people. There were a number of different groups arrested yesterday, and that has been quite well publicised. The allegation in relation to the throwing of rape alarms ended up with 3 individuals who were volunteers for Westminster Night Stars who go out in the evenings in order to support vulnerable people, to provide them with rape alarms to ensure their safety on the way home. And the Westminster Council have put out a statement expressing how concerned they are